Ever seen a grown woman in a $300 designer pantsuit completely lose it, screaming and banging on a locked gate like a caged animal, while cops snap handcuffs on her wrists? That was HOA President Delilah Thornfield, the second her $500,000 scam fell apart. She actually tried to sell my private lake, my family's 70-year legacy, behind my back. The cool morning mist over the water carried the sweetest smell of instant karma as she pounded those iron bars, mascara running, yelling at officers who weren't buying her act. This entitled Karen thought she could bully a simple diesel mechanic into giving up what my Polish grandfather built from nothing with his own calloused hands. Dead wrong. While she was forging documents and showing developers around, I set the perfect trap. The moment she brought her buyers for the final walkthrough, I locked the gate, called 911, and watched justice get served ice cold. Drop a comment with your craziest HOA horror story. I bet it's wild. 3 months ago, my biggest worry was whether the bass were biting, and if Sarah's coffee would stay warm during my morning dock routine. My name's Marcus Tank Kowalski, and I fix diesel engines for a living. 42 years old, hands permanently stained with grease, and damn proud of it. Every morning I wake up in the same house where I grew up, looking out at the most beautiful sight in Pennsylvania. A crystal-clear lake that my grandfather Stanislav dug by hand in 1954. Picture this: 47 acres of pristine water surrounded by towering pine trees, morning mist rising like ghosts, and the sound of loons calling across water so clear you can see bass swimming 20 feet down. The smell of pine needles mixed with fresh water hits you the moment you step outside. That weathered dockwood feels smooth under your bare feet from decades of family footsteps. This lake isn't just property, it's 70 years of family soul. Grandfather Stanislaw escaped communist Poland with nothing but calloused hands and an iron will. Bought this swampy land for $800 when nobody else wanted it. Spent 3 years digging, hauling rocks, building that lake one shovelful at a time, with help from other Polish immigrants who understood what it meant to carve the American dream from raw earth. Every summer weekend for 70 years, this lake hosted family reunions, taught kids how to swim, provided quiet Sunday mornings where you could actually hear yourself think. My wife Sarah and I raised our 3 kids here. Emma's 16 now, Jake's 12, and little Sophie just turned 8. Saturday mornings mean pancakes on the dock, teaching them to cast fishing lines the same way grandfather taught me. The taste of Sarah's coffee mixing with morning air while kids' laughter echoes across water. That's pure happiness. Then, Delilah Thornfield moved into the neighborhood. 3 years ago, this woman rolls up in her white Lexus SUV with blessed bumper stickers, designer sunglasses, and an attitude bigger than her mortgage payments. Former real estate agent turned self-appointed neighborhood improvement specialist. Within 6 months, she's running for HOA president, promising to enhance property values and modernize our community standards. Red flag number 1? She started carrying around a leather-bound HOA handbook like it was holy scripture. Red flag number 2? Those surprise property inspections, where she'd show up unannounced with her fake concerned smile and passive-aggressive clipboard. Oh, Marcus, I'm just so worried about how your rustic aesthetic might affect our community's marketability, she'd coo, eyeing my work truck like it was a disease. But the lake? She'd stare at it like a shark circling wounded prey, always asking questions. Who maintains the water quality? Are there proper safety barriers? Has anyone assessed the environmental impact? I should have seen trouble brewing when she started those concerned citizens meetings about underutilized community resources. Neighbors who'd lived here for decades suddenly getting lectures about property values and development opportunities. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in September. Sarah was making coffee, kids fighting over cereal, and I'm heading to my shop when this certified letter arrives. Return address, Millbrook Heights, HOA. Inside, a bill for $500 monthly lake maintenance fees for what they called our community water feature. $500 a month for a lake my family built and maintained for 70 years before their HOA even existed. The letter claimed the lake was technically within HOA boundaries and subject to community oversight and assessment. Threatened to lien on our property if we didn't pay within 30 days. My hands shook reading that garbage. The The taste in my mouth went from morning coffee to pure fury. Sarah found me standing in the driveway, crushing that letter in my fist, staring at the lake where grandfather's spirit still lives in every ripple. They want to charge us to own our own lake, I told her. That's when I knew Delilah Thornfield had just picked a fight with the wrong Polish family. I marched straight to the HOA office that afternoon, armed with my grandfather's original property deed, survey maps, and 70 years of righteous anger. The office sat in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Subway, trying to look official with fake wood paneling and motivational posters about community excellence. The smell of cheap air freshener couldn't mask the stench of bureaucratic bullshit. Delilah sat behind her desk like a queen on her throne, perfectly manicured nails clicking against her laptop. When I walked in, she flashed that practiced real estate smile, the kind that screams, "I'm about to screw you, but politely." "Marcus, how wonderful to see you. I assume you're here about the lake maintenance assessment?" I slammed the documents on her desk. "This is my grandfather's deed from 1954, original survey maps. This lake existed 20 years before your HOA was even a thought." She barely glanced at the papers, dismissing them like junk mail. "Oh, sweetie, these old documents are charming, but they don't supersede modern community standards. The lake clearly falls within our current boundary assessments." "Current boundary what? You can't just redraw property lines because you feel like it." Her condescending smile never wavered. "Marcus, I understand this is confusing for someone without a legal background. Perhaps you should leave these matters to people who actually understand property law." The way she said it, like I was some knuckle-dragging moron who couldn't possibly grasp complex legal concepts. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 3 years in law school before grandfather's stroke changed everything. I remembered enough to know she was feeding me pure garbage, but I played dumb. Sometimes letting people underestimate you is the smartest strategy. "I'd like to see these new boundary assessments." "Of course. They'll be available for public review once our surveyor completes his work. Should be any day now." Red flag number 1, a surveyor she'd never mentioned before, working on boundaries established for decades. I kept my expression neutral while my brain started connecting dots. The next morning, I did what any smart property owner does when dealing with liars. I installed trail cameras around the lake perimeter. Hunting cameras work just as well for tracking human predators as they do for deer. 3 days later, reviewing footage over morning coffee, I hit jackpot. There's Delilah, Tuesday afternoon, walking my property line with some guy in an expensive suit, both carrying measuring equipment and clipboards. But the real gut punch came when I ran the mystery man's face through a reverse image search. Rex Grimshaw, owner of Grimshaw Development, the vulture who'd been turning every beautiful natural area in 3 counties into strip malls and luxury condos. I kept watching the footage, my coffee going cold as the truth unfolded. These two weren't surveying boundaries, they were planning highway robbery. Grimshaw kept pointing at the lake and gesturing toward the surrounding woods, while Delilah nodded eagerly. At one point, reading their lips, I caught him saying, $50 million project. My grandfather's peaceful sanctuary, where 3 generations learned to swim and find peace, was being carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey. That night, I pulled out those dusty law school textbooks I hadn't touched in 20 years. Pennsylvania property law became my bedtime reading. The concepts came flooding back. Adverse possession, homestead protections, and something beautiful called grandfathered use. Basically, if your property use predates local zoning laws, those laws can't touch you. My grandfather's 1954 lake trumped any modern HOA nonsense. But diving deeper into Grimshaw's background revealed his real playbook. Identify valuable properties, corrupt local officials, create expensive legal confusion, force owners into settlements, then swoop in with development deals. This wasn't Delilah's first rodeo. It was a well-rehearsed con game. Friday afternoon, I called the county recorder's office, asking about recent boundary surveys for our area. The clerk's answer made my day. No official surveys had been requested or filed for our neighborhood in over 5 years. Delilah's boundary assessment was complete fiction. Saturday morning brought the next surprise. Fresh tire tracks in the mud near my boat launch. Expensive tires, not the kind local fishermen use. Following them led to a spot where someone had been photographing the lake from multiple angles. My cameras captured the whole show. Delilah and Grimshaw's return visit, this time with a professional photographer documenting every inch of waterfront. They spent 2 hours measuring water depths, photographing dock structures, and having very animated discussions about something that clearly excited both of them. Sitting in my kitchen that night, staring at the evidence spread across the table, I realized this wasn't about HOA fees anymore. This was organized theft, disguised as community improvement. The taste of diesel fuel and determination mixed in my mouth as I planned my next move. These people had no idea they'd just picked a fight with someone who understood both engines and legal loopholes. Time to show them that underestimating a mechanic with a law degree is a very expensive mistake. 2 weeks later, Delilah escalated from petty theft to outright warfare. I was under the hood of a Peterbilt in my shop, the smell of hot metal and diesel fuel filling my nostrils, when Eddie came running over with a piece of paper flapping like a surrender flag. "Tank, you gotta see this. County health inspector just posted it on your gate." The notice made my wrench slip and scrape my knuckles raw. Cease and desist order. Environmental health violation. Recreational activities prohibited pending environmental assessment. Complaint filed regarding mosquito breeding grounds and potential water contamination hazards. The metallic taste of blood from my scraped knuckles mixed with pure fury. Delilah had gone nuclear. Environmental concern? Eddie spat. That lake's cleaner than most people's swimming pools. 20 minutes later, a white county van crunched up my gravel driveway. Out stepped Inspector Williams, clipboard ready, following behind Delilah like a trained dog. "Mr. Kowalski, need to inspect your water feature for potential health violations." "Water feature? Sir, this is private property. That lake's been here since 1954. Williams looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and Delilah. "Well, ma'am here filed a complaint about standing water creating breeding grounds for disease-carrying insects." I watched Delilah's fake concerned expression as she pointed toward my pristine lake like it was a toxic waste dump. "I'm just worried about our children's safety, Inspector. You understand." What Williams didn't know, what I'd learned years ago in law school, was that filing false environmental reports is a felony in Pennsylvania, especially when done for personal gain. The state takes bogus complaints seriously because they waste resources and undermine real environmental protection. The inspector spent an hour taking water samples while Delilah hovered nearby, making helpful suggestions about problem areas. The whole charade stank worse than week-old bait. That evening, I called the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection directly. The investigator, Janet Morrison, had 20 years of experience separating real environmental threats from property dispute nonsense. "Mr. Kowalski, we get about 50 bogus complaints monthly from people trying to weaponize environmental law. If your lake's been there since 1954 with no problems, this smells like harassment." 3 days later, Janet called with news that made me grin like a kid on Christmas morning. "Your lake actually provides natural groundwater filtration for the entire area. It's what keeps your neighbors' wells clean." Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't understand basic environmental science or doesn't care about facts. But Janet's investigation revealed something that made my gut tighten. Delilah had filed her environmental complaint the exact same day she'd met with Grimshaw for their photography session. Same day. Digging deeper through public records, I discovered Grimshaw Development had donated 10 grand to local political campaigns, including County Commissioner Bradley's re-election fund. Guess whose office assigned Inspector Williams to my case? Bradley's. The corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. I spent the next week building my counter-offensive, filed formal complaints with the DEP, citing harassment and false reporting. Documented the timeline, showing Delilah's complaint coincided perfectly with her developer meetings. Every piece of evidence, carefully cataloged and cross-referenced. But Delilah wasn't finished playing dirty. The following Tuesday, anonymous flyers appeared on every neighborhood mailbox. "Stop the lake hoarder," in bold letters, with an unflattering long-distance photo of me. The text accused me of selfishly blocking community improvement and threatening property values with unsafe water conditions. My kids became collateral damage. Emma came home upset because classmates were asking why her dad was being mean to the nice HOA lady. Jake got into a fight defending our family honor, and little Sophie asked if we were bad people because Mrs. Henderson's grandson said so. Sarah found me that night on the dock, listening to loons call across water that had brought our family peace for decades. now the epicenter of a war I never wanted. Tank, maybe we should just pay the fees, keep the peace. I understood her fear. Last year's cancer treatment had drained our savings, and this stress wasn't helping her recovery. Every protective instinct wanted to shield her from this battle. But staring at grandfather's weathered dock, remembering 70 years of family barbecues, fishing lessons, and healing moments this sacred place had provided, surrender wasn't an option. Sarah, if we let her steal this, what stops her from taking everything else? Our kids deserve to inherit courage, not fear. She squeezed my calloused hand, understanding the weight of legacy we were protecting. The next morning brought a gift from my trail cameras, footage of Delilah meeting privately with Inspector Williams in the strip mall parking lot, having what looked like a very cozy conversation. Time to stop playing defense and start hunting the real predators. 3 weeks into October, Delilah decided to bring out the heavy artillery. I was replacing brake pads on Mrs. Henderson's Honda when Eddie burst into my shop, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of burning leaves and his panicked breathing. Tank, they're at the township building right now. Emergency zoning hearing. Delilah's trying to get your lake declared a public safety hazard. I dropped my wrench, the metallic clang echoing off concrete walls, wiped grease on my coveralls, and raced to the township office. The parking lot overflowed. Half the neighborhood had shown up for this ambush. Inside, Delilah commanded the podium like a seasoned prosecutor, wearing her most authoritative pantsuit and clutching official-looking documents with impressive gold seals. Distinguished board members, I present professional engineering analysis proving this private lake poses catastrophic flood risk to neighboring properties. We're requesting immediate drainage for community safety. The engineering report came from Hartwell Associates, Grimshaw Development's bought and paid for consulting firm. I'd researched these clowns online. They specialized in environmental fiction, transforming harmless retention ponds into apocalyptic flood threats for the right price. Board Chairman Williams raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Thornfield, this lake's existed 70 years without flooding anybody. What suddenly changed? Recent climate patterns have intensified rainfall events, Delilah replied with courtroom confidence. This analysis shows potential catastrophic overflow during severe weather. Scientific-sounding garbage wrapped in authority she didn't possess. I stood from the back row. I'd like to present counter-evidence. Delilah's head snapped around like I'd slapped her. Her polished smile flickered before clicking back into place. Of course, Marcus. We always welcome input from affected parties. I approached the podium carrying ammunition that would shatter her entire scheme. I hired Dr. Patricia Novak from Penn State's Hydrology Department for an independent assessment. Dr. Novak's report was devastating. My lake didn't create flood risk. It prevented it by serving as natural storm retention. 70 years of weather data proved the lake had protected neighbors' foundations during every major storm event. But here's what made the room collectively gasp. Dr. Novak had uncovered documents showing Delilah already had signed preliminary purchase agreements with Grimshaw Development, complete with clauses reading, "Property transfer contingent on resolution of water rights issues." She'd been planning this heist before our first conversation. Furthermore, I continued, channeling every ounce of legal training from my abandoned law career, Mrs. Thornfield has concealed financial conflicts with the development company promoting this drainage scheme. Angry whispers rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who'd supported Delilah started shifting uncomfortably, realizing they'd been played. Delilah's composure fractured like ice under pressure. That's completely irrelevant. This is about community safety, not personal attacks. Personal? When you stand to profit millions from forcing neighbors to destroy their heritage, time for the killing blow. I've also discovered that Mrs. Thornfield's HOA presidency appears to be constitutionally invalid. My attorney friend Rodriguez had spent sleepless hours dissecting HOA bylaws, uncovering a fatal constitutional flaw. Board members required 5 years continuous residency before election eligibility. Delilah had relocated 18 months during messy divorce proceedings, never properly re-establishing legal residency status. Every decision she'd made, every fee collected, every violation issued, potentially void under Pennsylvania law. What she'd been doing carried a specific legal term, theft by deception, with serious felony implications. Chairman Williams called immediate recess to review explosive new evidence. During the break, I watched Delilah frantically texting, probably warning Grimshaw their million-dollar conspiracy was collapsing in real time. The most satisfying moment came when Mrs. Henderson approached with a bulging manila envelope, her elderly hands trembling slightly. "Marcus, I've been documenting everything for 2 years. Had a feeling we'd need proof eventually." Inside were photocopied minutes from every HOA meeting, showing Delilah's systematic manipulation. Rigged votes, excluded dissenting voices, unauthorized emergency decisions designed to benefit her developer cronies while bleeding the community dry. When proceedings resumed, I presented this evidence to an increasingly outraged board. The pattern was crystal clear. Delilah had transformed our neighborhood association into her personal money laundering operation, collecting bogus fees while promising developers access she couldn't legally provide. The vote came swift and unanimous. Drainage request denied, pending full criminal investigation into HOA governance violations. Delilah stormed out, designer heels stabbing linoleum like tiny daggers, leaving behind clouds of expensive perfume and cheaper lies. That evening, Sarah and I sat on grandfather's weathered dock, watching moonlight shimmer across water that had nearly been stolen from future generations. "Think she'll surrender now?" Sarah asked hopefully. I listened to loons calling across the lake, their voices echoing 70 years of family memories. "Honey, cornered predators fight dirtiest when they smell their own blood. She's got too much money at stake to quit." The taste of victory mixed with anticipation. This war was entering its deadliest phase. The smoking gun arrived through my attorney friend Rodriguez, who dropped it on my kitchen table like a live grenade. "Tank, you're not going to believe what I found digging through public records." The stack of documents made my coffee taste bitter. Delilah's financial world was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Her mortgage papers told the whole ugly story. 2 loans totaling $847,000 on a house worth maybe $650,000. Underwater by nearly 200 grand, with monthly payments that would break most people. But the real gut punch was buried in her divorce settlement. Delilah owed her ex-husband $200,000 by March 15th, just 5 months away. Or he could force sale of everything and claim half her future earnings. "Rodriguez, she's not just greedy, she's drowning." "Gets worse," he said, pulling out more papers. Her real estate license was suspended 18 months ago for misrepresenting property values in a development scheme that went bust. No license, no income. The smell of desperation practically rose from those documents like steam. Suddenly everything clicked into focus. The aggressive timeline, the criminal risks, the willingness to forge documents and bribe officials. Delilah wasn't just trying to steal my lake for profit. She was fighting to avoid bankruptcy and homelessness. But here's where the power dynamic shifted completely. Her invalid HOA presidency meant every contract, every agreement, every promise she'd made to Grimshaw Development was legally worthless. She'd been selling him something she had no authority to deliver. What happens when Grimshaw figures out he's been partnering with a fraud? Rodriguez's expression darkened. Desperate people become liabilities, and liabilities have a way of disappearing from business deals. That afternoon brought another revelation. I'd been wondering who was feeding me inside information, and Rodriguez solved that mystery through his network of legal contacts. Tank, Grimshaw's been getting nervous about Delilah's increasingly erratic behavior. His corporate attorney thinks she's become a loose cannon who could bring down the entire development deal. The attorney, bound by professional ethics but concerned about potential criminal liability, had been quietly documenting everything in case Grimshaw tried to throw him under the bus later. She doesn't know it yet, but she's already been cut out of the profit-sharing agreement. Grimshaw is planning to claim she acted without authority and sue her for misrepresentation. The betrayal was already in motion, but the most chilling discovery came from Rodriguez's review of recent property transactions. Delilah and Grimshaw weren't just targeting my lake. They'd identified 3 other waterfront families for forced buyouts, creating a continuous development corridor potentially worth $75 million. My family was just the first domino in a much larger scheme. Rodriguez, how many other families don't know they're about to lose everything? The Hendersons, the Patels, and the Kowalskis on Maple Street all have property Grimshaw needs for his master plan. That night, the weight of responsibility kept me awake. This wasn't just about protecting my grandfather's legacy anymore. 3 other families were walking unknowingly toward financial destruction. Sarah found me sitting on the dock at midnight, listening to loons call across water that had become the center of a conspiracy much larger than I'd imagined. Tank, what if we just took their money and ran, started fresh somewhere else? Looking at that moonlit lake, remembering grandfather's hands building permanent beauty from temporary hardship, surrender felt like betrayal of everything he'd sacrificed for. Sarah, if we don't stop this here, they'll destroy the Hendersons next, then the Patels. Sometimes you fight not because you want to, but because you're the only one who can. The next morning, I began planning something that would end this conspiracy permanently. Time to use Delilah's desperation as the weapon that would destroy her. The next morning, I called Eddie and Rodriguez for an emergency war council in my workshop. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings, mixed with the bitter taste of determination, as we spread documents across my workbench like battlefield maps. Gentlemen, we're not just defending my lake anymore. We're stopping a conspiracy that's about to destroy 4 innocent families. Rodriguez pulled out his legal pad, sketching our battle plan with the precision of a surgeon. Tank, we need to think like federal prosecutors now. Multiple felony charges, multiple defendants, evidence so tight it's bulletproof. The beauty of Delilah's financial desperation was how predictable it made her. Drowning people grab anything within reach, even if it pulls them deeper underwater. Here's what we know, I said, counting off points on my calloused fingers. She's broke, legally powerless, and has 4 months before losing everything. When Grimshaw betrays her, and he will, she'll try something desperate enough to save herself. Eddie had been studying my property layout with an electrician's eye for detail. Tank, what if we give her exactly what she thinks she wants? Let her believe she's finally outsmarted you, then snap the trap shut when she's most exposed. That's when the plan crystallized like morning frost on the lake. We would create a scenario where Delilah would commit multiple felonies while thinking she'd won, surrounded by witnesses, cameras, and law enforcement. Her own greed would become the rope she'd hang herself with. Eddie's physical trap was pure genius. We spent 3 days building a remote-controlled gate system that appeared broken but responded to my smartphone like a trained dog. From outside, the electronic lock would look malfunctioned, making the property seem vulnerable. But one tap on my phone would lock it tighter than a prison cell. It's beautiful, Eddie grinned, installing pinhole cameras inside realistic-looking birdhouses around the perimeter. They walk in thinking they're hunters, but they're really the prey. Rodriguez was constructing our legal fortress simultaneously. Hours of research into Pennsylvania's Private Property Protection Act had revealed something beautiful: treble damages for property rights violations committed through criminal conspiracy. Tank, when we prove intentional fraud, you're looking at $450,000 in damages, plus attorney fees. That's college money for your kids and a permanent conservation fund for this lake. More importantly, our evidence would protect the other targeted families. Rodriguez had discreetly warned the Hendersons, Patels, and the Maple Street Kowalskis about the conspiracy, helping them secure their property documentation before Grimshaw's wolves arrived. My law school training and decades of mechanical troubleshooting had taught me that complex problems usually have simple solutions. You identify the source, isolate it, then eliminate it permanently. Thursday brought a crucial phone call to Janet Morrison at the Pennsylvania Environmental Protection Agency. Janet, remember that fraudulent lake complaint? I've got evidence of systematic environmental fraud spanning multiple properties. Her voice sharpened with prosecutorial interest. Tank, if you can prove someone filed false environmental reports as part of organized property theft, we're talking federal charges with serious prison time. I also contacted Maria Santos, the investigative reporter who'd been exposing HOA corruption throughout the county. The smell of a Pulitzer-worthy story practically crackled through the phone. Maria, interested in a story about organized real estate fraud targeting working families? I'm interested in meeting today. This sounds like exactly what I've been tracking. Community support was overwhelming. Mrs. Henderson had been secretly documenting every suspicious HOA activity for 2 years. The Patels had security footage of unmarked vehicles photographing their waterfront property. My kids contributed too. Emma created a detailed harassment timeline using social media posts and school records. But the psychological trap was my favorite element. I would let Delilah believe her real estate expertise and political connections had finally defeated a simple grease monkey. Pride makes people stupid, and stupid people make fatal mistakes. Proverb says pride goes before destruction, Rodriguez noted, organizing our evidence files. Her arrogance is about to be her downfall. Timing was everything. Courthouse contacts informed Rodriguez that Grimshaw planned to terminate his partnership with Delilah after their next property meeting. Her desperation would peak right before that betrayal, making her most likely to attempt something criminally reckless. We give her one perfect opportunity to destroy herself, I explained to Sarah during our evening lake walk. Loons calling across water that would soon be permanently protected. She gets property access, brings her criminal partners, commits multiple felonies on camera, then discovers she's caged with law enforcement closing in. Sarah's hand trembled slightly in mine. Tank, what if she becomes violent when she realizes she's trapped? That's why sheriff's deputies will be positioned around the entire perimeter before she arrives. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice served with surgical precision. The scent of pine needles and approaching victory filled the cool evening air. The trap was armed and ready. Now we just needed our prey to take the bait. The trap took exactly 6 days to spring itself. Monday morning, I was replacing the transmission on a logging truck when my trail cameras sent an alert to my phone. Delilah's white Lexus was parked at my gate, and she was examining the electronic lock with the intensity of a safecracker. Through the camera feed, I watched her test the gate mechanism, discovering exactly what Eddie and I wanted her to find. An apparently malfunctioned lock that seemed to grant easy access to my property. Her smile was visible even through the grainy camera footage. By Tuesday, word had spread through Delilah's network like wildfire. Rodriguez's courthouse contacts reported unusual activity in the county recorder's office. Someone was researching expedited eminent domain procedures and emergency property seizures. But Wednesday brought the escalation that made my blood run cold. Sarah came home from grocery shopping with her hands shaking and her voice barely controlled. Tank, someone cut our brake lines. The mechanic in me went ice-cold professional. But the husband and father wanted to tear someone's head off. I crawled under Sarah's Honda and found the damage, a clean slice in the brake line, precise enough to cause failure, but delayed enough to avoid immediate detection. This isn't Delilah, I told Rodriguez over the phone that evening. She's not smart enough or gutsy enough for attempted murder. This is Grimshaw cleaning up loose ends. Rodriguez's voice was grim. Tank, you need to understand what's happening. Grimshaw's timeline got moved up. Something spooked him into accelerating the whole operation. Through his legal network, Rodriguez had learned that Grimshaw Development was facing its own financial crisis. A major project in Ohio had collapsed, leaving the company leveraged beyond survival. The lake development wasn't just about profit anymore. It was about avoiding corporate bankruptcy. Desperate men do desperate things, Rodriguez warned, and a $75 million development deal is worth killing for. Thursday morning brought proof that we'd moved beyond property disputes into genuine warfare. Someone had been in my workshop overnight, tampering with my tools and equipment. Nothing was stolen, but my hydraulic jack had been sabotaged, the safety mechanism disabled so it would fail under load. If I'd used that jack on the wrong day, I'd have been crushed under 2 tons of truck. But here's where Delilah's amateur hour criminality became a gift. My security cameras caught her returning to my property that same afternoon, this time with Rex Grimshaw and 2 other men I didn't recognize. One carried a briefcase, the other had the posture and haircut of ex-military muscle. They spent 2 hours walking my property boundaries, taking measurements, and having animated discussions about access roads and construction logistics. At one point, Grimshaw pointed directly at my house and made a throat-cutting gesture that was crystal clear, even on grainy surveillance footage. They're not planning to buy me out anymore, I told Sarah that evening, as we sat in our kitchen with all the blinds drawn. They're planning to eliminate the problem permanently. The pressure was getting to my family. Emma started having nightmares about strangers breaking into our house. Jake asked if we needed to move somewhere safer. Little Sophie couldn't understand why Daddy looked so worried all the time. Sarah found me that night cleaning my grandfather's old hunting rifle, the one he'd used to put food on the table during those first hard years in America. Tank, maybe it's time to call the FBI. This has gone beyond local law enforcement. She was right, but I also knew that federal investigations take months to develop, and we had days before Delilah's financial deadline forced her into something catastrophic. Friday brought the news that made everything click into place. Rodriguez called with information from his courthouse network that made my hands shake. Tank, Grimshaw filed emergency development permits this morning. He's claiming urgent environmental remediation requires immediate access to your property. The permits are backdated and forged, but they'll fool local authorities long enough for him to get crews on your land. The scam was elegant in its simplicity. Grimshaw would use fake environmental permits to justify forcing access to my property, then create enough physical damage and legal confusion to pressure me into settlement. By the time courts sorted out the fraud, he'd have bulldozers destroying the lake and lawyers tying up my rights for years. But here's the beautiful part, Rodriguez continued. Using forged federal environmental permits is a felony that carries 10-year prison sentences. When we expose this, Grimshaw doesn't just lose the development deal, he loses his freedom. That evening, Eddie and I made final adjustments to our electronic trap, while Rodriguez coordinated with federal and local law enforcement. EPA agent Morrison had escalated our case to her criminal investigation unit. Sheriff's deputies were briefed and positioned for rapid response. The taste of anticipation mixed with diesel fumes as I checked and rechecked every detail of our plan. Saturday night, I sat on grandfather's dock for what might be the last peaceful moment before the storm. The scent of pine trees and still water carried 70 years of family memories. Tomorrow, Delilah would make her final desperate play, and we'd be ready for her. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that makes everything seem sharp and clear. Perfect weather for watching enemies destroy themselves. At exactly 9:47 a.m., my security system chimed with an alert that made my pulse quicken. Delilah's Lexus was approaching my gate, followed by a white county van and a black Escalade with tinted windows. Game time, I texted Eddie and Rodriguez simultaneously. Through my hidden cameras, I watched the morning's opening act unfold. Delilah strutted to my gate wearing her most official-looking outfit, navy blazer, clipboard, and an expression of righteous authority. Behind her, a man in a county uniform examined the broken electronic lock, while the Escalade's occupants remained seated, engine running. The county official, obviously another bought and paid-for participant in this conspiracy, spent exactly 30 seconds pretending to investigate before declaring the gate mechanism unsafe and requiring immediate bypass for emergency access. What they didn't know was that every word was being recorded in crystal-clear digital audio. At 10:15 a.m., Delilah made the phone call that would seal her fate. Standing next to my gate, she dialed someone and spoke loudly enough for our hidden microphones to capture every incriminating word. "Rex, we're ready for Phase 2. The access route is secured, and the county official has signed off on emergency entry. Your people can begin site preparation immediately." 5 minutes later, Grimshaw's construction crew arrived in 2 large trucks carrying surveying equipment, soil testing gear, and what looked suspiciously like preliminary demolition tools. The smell of diesel exhaust and criminal conspiracy filled the morning air. "Tank," Rodriguez's voice crackled through my earpiece. "They're about to commit felony trespassing with criminal conspiracy enhancement. You want to spring the trap now?" "Not yet. Let them get deeper into the property. I want this to be so ironclad that even the most corrupt judge can't ignore it." For the next hour, I watched Grimshaw's crew systematically document my lake for destruction. They took water depth measurements, soil samples from the shoreline, and photographs of every structure on the property. One crew member actually hammered a surveyor's stake into the ground near grandfather's dock. But the moment that made my blood boil came when Delilah pointed to my family's memorial stones, small granite markers honoring deceased relatives, and told the crew to note those for removal during site clearing. They were planning to desecrate my family's sacred space for a strip mall parking lot. At 11:30 a.m., Grimshaw himself arrived in his silver Mercedes, stepping onto my property like he already owned it. The bastard actually had the audacity to light up a cigar while discussing placement of luxury condos where my kids had learned to swim. "Rodriguez, how many felonies are we up to now? Trespassing, conspiracy, fraud, violation of federal environmental laws, and that's just the warm-up. When we add the sabotage attempts and bribery evidence, we're looking at enough charges to put these people away for decades." But Delilah's masterstroke was yet to come. At 11:45 a.m., she gathered everyone in a circle near the lake center and delivered a speech that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. Ladies and gentlemen, by this time next month, this entire area will be the foundation for Millbrook Heights premium development. The existing structures will be demolished, the lake will be filled and graded, and will break ground on luxury residential units starting at $850,000. She actually applauded herself as Grimshaw's crew cheered. That's when I noticed something that made my mechanic's instincts tingle. The black Escalade had moved from its original position near the gate to a spot directly blocking the exit route. Its occupants, two men who looked like they'd stepped out of a mob movie, were no longer sitting casually. They were standing outside the vehicle, watching the tree line with the alertness of professionals who sensed something was wrong. "Rodriguez, I think they're getting suspicious. Grimshaw's security is repositioning." "Tank, we've got enough evidence to convict everyone present. Maybe it's time to end this before someone gets hurt." But I wanted one more nail in their coffin. Delilah was about to provide it. At exactly noon, she pulled out her phone and made a call that would destroy any remaining legal defense. "Judge Morrison, Delilah Thornfield. Yes, the development permits we discussed are being executed today. The property owner has been cooperative, thanks to your intervention with the county inspector. Your payment will be processed as usual. Judicial bribery, a federal felony carrying 20-year sentences. Now Rodriguez, spring it now." I tapped my phone, activating the gate lock with a satisfying electronic click that echoed across the property like a gunshot. Delilah's head snapped toward the sound, and for the first time that morning, her confident expression cracked. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced through my hidden PA system, "you're all under citizen's arrest for criminal conspiracy, fraud, trespassing, and bribery. Please remain where you are. Law enforcement is en route." The panic that followed was beautiful to watch. Chaos erupted like a kicked hornet's nest. Delilah spun in circles, her perfectly styled hair whipping around as she searched for the source of my voice. "This is illegal. You can't trap people on private property." "Ma'am," I replied through the PA system with the calm confidence of someone who'd studied law for 3 years. "Citizen's arrest is perfectly legal in Pennsylvania when witnessing felony crimes in progress. You've just committed about 12 of them." Grimshaw's muscle-bound security team rushed the gate, discovering what Eddie's electronic lock could do when properly motivated. The satisfying sound of reinforced steel refusing to budge echoed across the property. "Boss, we're locked in tight," one of them reported to Grimshaw, who had gone pale beneath his expensive tan. That's when the cavalry arrived. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez led the parade of law enforcement vehicles that surrounded my property with the precision of a military operation. Behind him came 2 EPA criminal investigators, a Pennsylvania State Police detective and FBI agent Sarah Chen, who'd been monitoring Grimshaw development for federal crimes across 3 states. "This is Deputy Martinez with the County Sheriff's Office. You are surrounded. Please move away from the gate and place your hands where we can see them." The sight of Delilah's reaction was worth every sleepless night of this war. She pointed frantically toward the woods where my voice was coming from, screaming about illegal surveillance and entrapment, while mascara ran down her cheeks like black tears. "Rex, do something! You said you had this handled!" Grimshaw's response revealed everything about their partnership's true nature. "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here as a legitimate businessman, responding to your invitation to tour available property." The betrayal was swift and brutal. Grimshaw was throwing Delilah under the bus before the engines had even stopped running. But my favorite moment came when EPA agent Morrison stepped through the gate Eddie had electronically opened for law enforcement. She carried a briefcase full of evidence and an expression that could have frozen hell itself. "Rex Grimshaw, you're under arrest for conspiracy to file false environmental reports, fraud, and violation of federal environmental protection statutes. Delilah Thornfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, theft, and filing false police reports." The Miranda rights reading was like music, a symphony of justice finally being served to people who'd thought themselves above the law. Rodriguez emerged from his position in the woods, followed by Maria Santos and her photographer, who'd been documenting everything for what would become the local newspaper's biggest story of the decade. "Tank Kowalski, I announced, stepping into the clearing where my family's lake sparkled in the November sunlight. And this is my grandfather's lake that nobody was ever going to steal. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Maria Santos interviewed me while photographers captured Delilah being loaded into a police car, still screaming about her rights and demanding to speak to her lawyer. Mr. Kowalski, how does it feel to have stopped what appears to be an organized criminal conspiracy? Ma'am, this was never about feeling good. This was about protecting what previous generations built and making sure corrupt people can't steal from working families. But the most satisfying moment came when Mrs. Henderson, the Patels, and the Maple Street Kowalskis arrived to witness the arrests. These were the families who would have been Grimshaw's next victims, now protected by the evidence we'd gathered. "Tank," Mrs. Henderson said with tears in her eyes, "you saved our homes." The criminal charges read like a prosecutor's dream: conspiracy, fraud, bribery, filing false reports, attempted theft, criminal trespassing, and multiple federal environmental violations. Rodriguez estimated the combined prison sentences could exceed 40 years. As the police vehicles departed with their criminal cargo, the crowd that had gathered began to applaud. Not just my family and close neighbors, but people from throughout the county who'd heard about the confrontation and driven over to witness corrupt officials finally being held accountable. Sarah found me standing on grandfather's dock, watching the last police car disappear down the road that had brought so much trouble to our peaceful lake. "Tank, is it really over?" The taste of victory was sweeter than Sarah's morning coffee, and more satisfying than a perfectly tuned engine. "Honey, it's over. They're going to prison, the lake is safe, and every family they targeted is now protected." Eddie clapped me on the shoulder. "Tank, you just proved that sometimes the little guy really can win." I looked across the water that had nearly been stolen, watching loons return to the surface after hiding during the commotion. The scent of pine needles and clean water filled the air, carrying no trace of the corruption that had almost destroyed this sacred place. "Gentlemen, my grandfather always said that America works when good people refuse to back down. Today, we proved he was right." The November sun reflected off the lake's surface like diamonds, illuminating 70 years of family legacy that would now survive for 70 more. 6 months later, the courtroom drama was over, and justice had been served with the precision of a Swiss watch. Delilah Thornfield received 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and $150,000 in restitution payments, split between the HOA she'd robbed and my family for the harassment and property damage. Rex Grimshaw got 5 years for conspiracy, fraud, and environmental crimes, plus forfeiture of assets totaling $2.3 million. The corrupt county commissioner who'd taken bribes resigned in disgrace, and Judge Morrison faced federal investigation for judicial corruption. Sometimes the justice system actually works when good people refuse to stay silent. But the real victory wasn't measured in prison sentences or court judgments. I used the restitution money exactly as I'd promised Rodriguez, establishing the Stanislaw Kowalski Environmental Scholarship for local students pursuing careers in environmental protection and conservation. 12 kids have already received funding to study everything from water management to sustainable development, ensuring that grandfather's legacy would protect the environment for generations. The lake itself became the centerpiece of something beautiful. Pennsylvania Environmental Protection Agency designated it as a heritage natural area, providing permanent protection against future development schemes. The University of Pennsylvania established a research station on our property, where students study water quality, wildlife preservation, and natural habitat management. Every semester, I host Know Your Rights workshops for homeowners dealing with HOA corruption or property disputes. The classes are always packed, and the stories people share remind me that our fight protected more than just one family's legacy. Rodriguez launched a practice specializing in homeowner rights advocacy, using our case as a template for fighting organized property theft. He's already helped 37 families protect their homes from similar schemes, proving that knowledge really is power when wielded correctly. The community healing surprised everyone. Our new HOA board operates with complete transparency, all meetings recorded, all financial records public, all decisions requiring majority homeowner approval. Delilah's reign of terror had actually strengthened our neighborhood's commitment to honest governance. But the most meaningful change was personal. Sarah's health improved dramatically once the stress disappeared. Her cancer remained in remission, and the doctor said reducing anxiety had measurably strengthened her immune system. Emma, Jake, and Sophie went from being ashamed of their family's trouble to being proud of their father's courage in standing up to bullies. Every Sunday, our lake hosts family gatherings that would make grandfather beam with pride. 3 generations of Kowalskis gather on the dock he built, sharing stories, cooking traditional Polish foods, and teaching kids to fish using techniques passed down through decades. The annual Lake Conservation Day has become a county-wide celebration, bringing together families for environmental education and community building. Last year, over 300 people attended, including several families Rodriguez had helped protect from property theft schemes. Local businesses that had been pressured to boycott my family during the conflict now proudly display Tank Kowalski customer signs, understanding that supporting principled people strengthens the entire community. I still fix diesel engines for a living, but now my hands work with the satisfaction of someone who proved that honest work and moral courage can defeat organized corruption. The smell of motor oil and the feel of worn tools remind me daily that grandfather's values, hard work, integrity, and never backing down from bullies, remain as powerful today as they were in 1954. The taste of morning coffee on our dock, mixed with pine-scented air and the sound of loons calling across protected water, represents everything worth fighting for in this world. Sometimes people ask if I regret not just taking Grimshaw's money and moving somewhere peaceful. My answer is always the same. Peace isn't something you find by running away. Peace is something you create by standing up for what's right. 3 weeks ago, Emma started her freshman year at Penn State, majoring in environmental law. She wants to fight for families like ours, who face organized theft disguised as development. Jake talks about becoming a mechanic like his dad, but one who knows about law stuff too. Sophie just wants to make sure the lake stays beautiful forever. Looking at this water that nearly became a parking lot, I know grandfather's spirit lives in every ripple. His American dream wasn't just about owning property. It was about building something permanent that would outlast the people who tried to destroy it. Share your HOA nightmare story in the comments below. I read every single one and respond personally. And hit that subscribe button for more stories about ordinary people, defeating corrupt systems through courage, preparation, and refusing to surrender what previous generations built for us. The loons are calling again across Kowalski Lake, and all is right with the world.